Hello, and welcome to episode 1 of the Built for Hard podcast. My name is Adam Kreek, Olympic gold medalist, executive coach, business coach. This podcast is created for founders, for executives, for people in the world of work and business who are doing hard things. I've been in the world of work and business for the last 20 years, working alongside leaders, helping them accomplish great things, and that's a great joy in my life to do hard things with other people. The purpose of this podcast is simply to read essays that I have written. These essays and blog posts are on my blog at valuesdrivenachievement.com. Today's first blog post that I'm going to read is The Leadership River. The Leadership River is about navigating growth as a leader. It's based on some thoughts developed by Ram Charan and some of his partners, who is a management thinker. It's about how our role as a leader changes based on the time we spend on certain tasks, the skills we need to develop, and what we care about or what we value as a leader, as a worker, as someone doing hard things. I'll start with a quote by Ram Charan. First-time managers are responsible for getting work done through others rather than getting work done on their own. The Leadership River, navigating growth as a leader. Leadership is a journey and a destination. For many, this journey resembles a river, a constant flow of responsibilities, relationships, and decisions. As leaders progress through their careers, their challenges grow, their scope widens, and their values evolve. The Leadership River, a modern take on the leadership pipeline, conceptualized by Walt Mailer and refined by Ram Charan, provides a roadmap for this evolution, possibly even your evolution. So I guess I might give commentary as I read this. This is my first time, so I'm getting used to what this podcast might even look like. The river is your guide. Using the river as a guide, leaders can find better understanding of their growth trajectory. For instance, are you leading individual contributors or managers? Adjust your values to emphasize developing others. Individual contributors, for those who don't know, are people who specialize in a skill set. They could be a craftsman or someone, and they're very good at their job, but they don't manage other people. Managers, on the other hand, have responsibilities of deploying resources and getting the maximum amount out of people. Because there's limited time, limited resources, limited money. And so managers have to balance all that, whereas an individual contributor has a more specialized function and role within the organization. We use the Leadership River as a guide as well when we move from managing one team to a portfolio of teams. And if this is your challenge, start appreciating the success of others over personal wins. This framework highlights how leadership responsibilities expand as you move through various levels, from managing yourself to managing an entire organization. You'll notice young people, when they like to post online, they post about their morning rhythms, their morning rituals, and what they do to take care of themselves and manage themselves. Older people often make fun of it, I myself as well, because I'm a parent, and I've got a far more complex life than I did when I was in my 20s. You have different responsibilities at different levels in the organization, and this is what this essay truly is about. And I brought in the river analogy because it adds depth to this understanding by emphasizing the flow and increasing complexity as you progress upstream as a leader and in the context of an organization. The Leadership River is also about scope. I'm going off script a little bit if you're following along and reading. But the Leadership River is about scope. When I talk about scope, we can look at the work we do through a sense of time. So we can figure out what we need to do in the coming days, what works we need to do in the coming week, the coming weeks or month. We can look at the work we need to do in the coming quarter or quarters, what needs to be done in the coming year, what needs to be done in the future 4 years, maybe 10, 12, 20 years down the road. And each of these have different scopes and frames and styles of thinking that we need to embrace. And the leadership river helps us classify how to think about different problems and who in our organization should be thinking at different levels of scope around different levels of problems, as well as, through the lens of how we're spending our time, what skills we need to develop, and what we need to value at different levels of complexity and leadership. So let's get back to the article. Leadership transition from sales to general management. So these are based on stories of clients I've worked with in the past, anonymized for obvious reasons. A lot of the work I do is highly confidential, and there's a lot of trust that's placed in me as a coach and advisor. So I anonymize them, and sometimes it feels a little bit cheesy because they're anonymized, but rest assured they're based on real case studies, and it's done for a purpose, just to respect people, because not everyone's as public as I am or I've been. So leadership transition from sales to general management. Take the story of John, a successful sales leader in an engineering firm I coached. When he transitioned into the role of general manager, it's a big transition, leading a sales team to general manager. There's a great HBR article if you want to look it up. There's 8 qualities that a general manager needs to embrace to be a success. I don't have those off the top of my head, so I should get back to reading. But it is a big leap from leading a sales team to managing an entire business. His success hinged on understanding the shifts in how he allocated his time. We've talked about that. Developed his skills and prioritized values, what he felt mattered more. So from a time perspective, John moved from focusing on immediate client relationships to managing the strategic initiatives and team dynamics. So he moved from talking to people, and I guess part of this is taking some of this corporate speak and trying to make it plain language. It makes sense when I'm reading and thinking about it in my head, but as I talk through, some of these words almost feel like gobbledygook, if that makes sense. But that's what I'm doing, anyways. I'm trying to explain what these $5 words mean in common language, the common vernacular. Let me get back to it. Okay, John moved from focusing on immediate client relationships, which was one-on-one conversations, talking to people, making sure that you're building that relationship, understanding the client's needs, serving those needs, to managing strategic initiatives and team dynamics. So John moved into the seat of figuring out what industries do we need to target? Which customers are a priority? Where do we need to spend less time and less resources? And where do we need to spend more time and more resources? That's what a manager does. They're balancing constantly, the time and resources. And he's also managing team dynamics. One complaint I often get from people who are getting into leadership roles, they feel like becoming a leader or a manager is like parenting, and guess what it is? And the world needs more great parents. When not everyone was blessed like you. You're probably a leader because you had great parents and great family. Not everyone's blessed by having a family that inculcated them with these skills and values. So this is the challenge of leadership and the challenge of management, and the opportunity. So John then had to be more focused on managing the team dynamics, how people interacted, what sort of rituals and cultural pieces he put into play. And Also, for John, from a time perspective, he had to allocate more time alone, time to analyze and reflect. That became crucial. Then skills. Remember, we've got time, skills, and values at every single threshold. Every new tributary that comes into the leadership river and makes the flow more turbulent, more complex. That's why I like the idea of the leadership river. You've got a nice steady stream when you're doing it on your own, and then you're doing it on your own and you're managing other people, and the stream gets more intense, and then you're no longer doing the work. You're managing people who are doing it and managing other people, and then soon you're managing managers and leading leaders. Then if it's a large organization, you might be in charge of a function like the engineering function or the sales function. And then you get to the point of truly leading the entire organization like a general manager. And if you're part of a very large organization, you start to be in charge of business groups and then an entire enterprise where there's businesses and groups of business and a full large enterprise with thousands of people and lots of different functions and lots of people doing different styles of work that somehow all work together and synergize to make tangible value and intangible value. That's the leadership river. So let's get back to the article. So skills, he had to master financial management. As a general manager, moving from sales to general management, he ended up going and taking some financial management courses, signed up at the local university, at the business school, and started to learn the language. I like the word vernacular. It's a fancy word, but you just have to understand what is a profit and loss statement, what is a balance sheet, what are these financial documents telling you. And getting a stronger understanding, his main breakthrough was understanding free cash flow, inventory management. He was constantly getting in trouble with the CFO because he would make decisions like, these rolls of tape are on sale, so I'm going to spend $20,000 because they're super cheap. But then all of a sudden, those rolls of tape weren't used up for 2-3 years. And that $20,000 that was invested in tape was no longer free cash flow. It was inventory that was slowly drawn down upon. And that impacted the organization's ability to manage free cash flow because you need to have cash coming in and out of an organization. So that was a challenge he faced, building his financial management and his strategic thinking. Well, he had to empower others to lead the client-facing roles. So this was actually one thing he was very good at and he enjoyed doing. He enjoyed interacting with clients, but he had to step back because that's part of leadership. You have to stop doing something you're good at and do something you're less good at as you work yourself up the ladder, down the river. Mixing metaphors here to build your skills. And finally, values. Values are value judgments. What you think matters, what you think is important. And my blog is called Values Driven Achievement. I like values because values are the first step of logic. They link emotion to logic and what you think. And when you become aware of values, you're able to interpret your emotions more effectively and make better, more logical, better decisions that are in better alignment. So from a values standpoint, personal accolades became secondary. And this is harder for a sales leader because salespeople are extroverted. Extroverted people do value human interaction and they do value recognition more than an introverted person might. And that's, there's nothing right or wrong about either of those. It's about wiring, I suppose, and it's about how that gets fed and expressed. And when we talk from a leadership standpoint, it's important to recognize who on your team is extroverted and who is introverted. The extroverts should have public recognition. That will fill their cup. An introvert who gets public recognition, that will make them feel uncomfortable. And that will empty their cup. Introverts still enjoy recognition. Often they like being recognized for their skills, not necessarily for what others saw or felt. And so that a private recognition of an introvert can go a long way to building trust and commitment with others. So this individual who moved into a leadership role, into supporting others, who was an extrovert, who enjoyed public recognition, had to figure out other ways to fill his cup because he was no longer getting that from the environment. The environment wasn't set up with the sharper elbows as you move up the leadership river to give him positive feedback. There was more critical direction, drive, urgency, expectation that the individual was taking care of their own needs and then advocating for what needed to change within the organization. So his personal accolades became secondary to fostering the success of his team and the organization as a whole. So as the organization gets recognized and as his unit within the corporation got recognized, or the enterprise got recognized, then he was able to find value in the recognition of the entire team. Oh, look what we created together. And the team success and the public recognition of his team became more satisfying. So this shift mirrors a key tributary in the leadership river, transitioning from managing leaders to managing functions and even managing a business. For John, the river's flow became stronger and faster, requiring a broader perspective and a more comprehensive leadership toolkit. There's a graphic here where I talk about a tale of two leaders, and the first leader comes home, and this leader values getting results, using their own skills. And this leader comes home and their partner says, "Hey, what went well at work today?" And the leader says, "Well, I was able to calm down an upset customer and fix the broken coffee machine." And then there's the next leader who's moved down the leadership river a little bit. And this leader values getting results by developing the skills of others. And this is a value shift. Instead of having the pride personally that you did it, you have the pride that someone else can now do it. And so this person's partner says, "Hey, well, what went well at work today?" And this leader comes home and says, "Hey, you know that new hire, Hassan? Well, he came on 4 months ago. Well, today he was actually able to calm down an upset customer, and he even fixed that broken coffee machine." You can take pride in your work, and you can take pride in the work of the people you lead. That's a shift in values. A tale of two leaders, from functional to business leadership. So now let's consider Jane. She was a marketing executive in the shipping industry. She excelled in managing her function. Her function was marketing. There's many functions. It could be marketing, it can be sales, it can be engineering, it can be finance, it can be financial control. Functions they have specific tasks that group under functions. This is organizational speak. She excelled at managing her function, but struggled when asked to lead cross-functional business strategies. So cross-functional means marketing has to work with sales, has to work with engineering, has to work with finance, has to work with operations. The transition from functional leadership to business leadership required 3 shifts. Time. Jane had to spend less time on tactical execution and more time envisioning long-term goals for the business unit, moving from tactical execution to strategic execution. This is something that Jocko Willink talks a lot about on his Echelon Front podcast. You move from being a tactician. It can't be the tough guy, Jocko Willink. Move from being tactical to being strategic. And tactical is about getting the thing done right now, effectively, efficiently now. And strategic is thinking longer term. And it's doing the hard work now that's going to pay off down the road. Skills. Jane, what did she need to do? She developed her competencies in profitability analysis, as well as short and long-term decision making, and having to find the balance between the company's needs and the market realities. So she's starting to develop value judgments, trade-offs, making strategic decisions, having to make the hard choices, having to make bets with the best information you have, and ideally you've had the education or the experience to make these trade-offs, to make these bets, to take the risks. You have to make decisions as a leader. That's one of the biggest skills we need to develop as leaders. Can you make better decisions faster? Develop a sense of judgment. Values. Her focus shifted from departmental success to holistic business outcomes. Within a business, each department will start fighting with one another, and that's by design, that's by purpose, because you can only see the organization through the lens of your departmental function. So, finance will be, fighting for free cash flow, or fighting for profit, or fighting for better data for reporting, whereas operations will be fighting for effective timelines so that they can execute. Sales will be fighting for people to deliver on their promises because they've had the relationship with the customers. And this tension is what makes an organizational work. And if you have good values, good culture, then that tension can be productive. That tension can be held and it can be productive tension. So Jane had to work on building culture. She had to work on building productive tension that was enough to push the right things forward, enough to force trade-offs and debates, but low enough that people still felt like they were a team and they were working together. Strong communication of vision, strong communication of purpose. Vision, this is what I see. We are doing. Purpose, this is why we are doing it. The leadership river helped Jane appreciate the larger system she was navigating. By understanding this progression, she not only thrived, but also laid the groundwork for her next leap. Let's think about it this way. If you're leading 4 people, so there's 5, you're 1, you're the leader, and there's 4 people you're leading. 80% of the output is from the team members, and 20% of the output is from you. This would be, a leader who's doing, a lot of the frontline work still. You're leading and doing. But if you're leading 40 people, 97.5% of the output is from the team members. That's only 2.5%. So you're leading 30, you may say leading 39 people. You're one of 40. You're only 2.5% of the output. And so if you're only 2.5% of the output, your job is to spend more time developing that leadership skill, more time developing that management skill. I like that analogy. Helps us recognize our place in the organization and what we should be spending our time doing, what we should value, and what skills we should develop. So let's talk more about the evolution of leadership, lessons from the river. The leadership river offers a powerful visual framework to describe these transformations. The following principles guide the journey. 1, increased scope requires broader skills. So we talked about scope earlier. As the time frame in which you think, so the larger the scope that you think, the more strategic you must be in the programs that you choose to deploy. As leaders move upstream, the size of their boat increases, whether you're leading 4 people or 40 people. You must learn to delegate and empower effectively. So delegate, and making sure that other people are doing things within the organization. Delegation is often what I'm working with mid-level and even senior leaders. How can you let go of certain tasks and let other people do it? Common rule of thumb is someone can do it at least 70 or 80% as well as you, then they should do it. They should do it and be bad at it and then develop that skill. and you should create the space for those individuals to build that skill and be able to do that task. I've lost my place. They must learn to delegate and empower effectively. Empower people. It's not empowering when people give you their task back and you just show them everything that they've done is wrong. Sandwich. Canadians were great at this sandwich method. Oh wow, that wall you built looked really good, but I put the level on it and it's 2 degrees off. We can't. Everything needs to be square and level on that wall you built. I like how hard you worked at it. We need to fix this wall, and you need to make sure that we're checking this, the level of the wall when we're building it. That's a way to empower someone versus yelling at them, shaming them, blaming them. So 2, here's another principle. From individual contribution to influence. This is another transition. Leaders transition from doing tasks themselves to achieving results through others. The leadership river illustrates this shift by showing the importance of team building and letting go of direct execution. So again, you're doing less in the business, doing less of the tasks, and you're focusing more on building the teams, building the environment, building the culture to get the thing done. Time allocation adjusts at every bend. So as the tributaries join the leadership river, the flow of the river increases. Whether setting strategy as an enterprise leader or managing a single business unit, time becomes more about prioritization and focus than busyness. We get addicted to busyness. We feel comfort. We feel control in doing the busy things. Prioritization is what makes it work for us. And 4, values drive decisions. This is values-driven achievement, built for hard. After all, we can do more hard things when we understand what we value and we understand the right things to value. So values evolve as your responsibilities grow. Moving upstream demands a focus on trade-offs, more global thinking, and visionary leadership. We want to follow leaders who have great vision, who can show us the future and take us there. So let's go to the very start of the leadership river, learning to manage yourself. So here's a client case study. A junior engineer in the auto industry. Mark was a newly hired engineer in a major auto manufacturer. He struggled to balance the demands of his roles. In his early days were filled with missed deadlines and a sense of being overwhelmed. His manager stepped in and taught him strategies for managing himself effectively, laying the foundation for his future leadership growth. Every part of this river builds on the last part. If you cannot manage yourself, if you cannot manage your time, you cannot move to the next level. Mark learned to optimize his schedule by prioritizing high-impact tasks and avoiding time-wasting distractions. For instance, he began to use time-blocking techniques to dedicate uninterrupted time to design work while leaving specific periods for responding to emails and attending meetings. So he set blocks in his calendar and he committed to that. He told himself he would do it and then he did it. That's integrity. We talk about integrity. Say you're going to do something and then you do it. Skills. What skills did he have to develop? Managing yourself requires mastering task prioritization, organization, focus. Mark adopted tools like project management software to track deadlines and ensure consistent progress. He also learned the importance of clear communication to set realistic expectations with his teammates and his supervisors. And values. Mark shifted from valuing output quantity to output quality. Quality over quantity. Be a craftsman. Be an artisan. He developed an appreciation for personal accountability and realized that managing his energy and his mindset through regular breaks, positive self-talk, was critical to sustaining his performance. At the foundation of leadership and accomplishment is energy. And I call this containment. And if we're unable to contain ourselves, we cannot contain others in our care. So when your role is to lead and manage yourself, how are you spending your time? Well, you're optimizing your personal output. You're attending meetings to gain context and to hone your focus. And 3, you're making sure that you're efficient in the use of the resources, the time, the money, the technology that's given to you. Skills that you're developing, you're mastering your craft. You're managing your time efficiently. You're remaining focused on the details of the work. And what do you value? You're prioritizing your work. You're learning more about personal efficacy and resource efficiency. You're doing your work better, cheaper, faster. You're just trying to build that productivity skill set. Then we have to make that shift on the leadership river from managing ourselves to managing others. So here's a case study. A municipal government analyst, Sam, a data analyst for a mid-sized municipal government. She excelled in creating reports that streamlined community planning. When she was promoted to the supervisor, her challenge was reallocating time. Instead of focusing solely on her deliverables, this leader had to guide their team to complete reports, develop their skills, and meet deadlines. So by time Sam learned to spend more time delegating tasks and less time creating spreadsheets. I noticed that her calendar shifted from 90% production to 50% team management. So more time working with people, removing blockages, supporting them emotionally, technically, proficiently. Skills. Sam developed her ability to coach and to provide constructive feedback, emphasizing results over process. What do they say? Focus on the what and pass the how. This is mission-style leadership. We talk about in military circles, what needs to get done, how you do it matters less, but this is what needs to be done by when. If you're not meeting the deadline, then I can step in and try to coach you to find a better way. But we can't take the how, otherwise we remove autonomy. I talk about autonomy in a few posts on self-determination theory. Motivation is huge as we start moving up the leadership river and understanding how it works. Motivation is about moving ourselves and moving other people into action. Values. Sam had to move from valuing their individual contributions to embracing the success of the team. It took effort to verbally celebrate junior analysts who produced high-quality work. She's naturally an introvert, so it was harder to give that positive affirmation out loud, but that was the work. That was the development. Even when they did it differently than Sam would have done. It's, again, more results-focused, less process-focused. So as you're leading and managing individual contributors, we need to learn how to reallocate our time so that assigned work is completed ourselves while also helping others perform effectively. And we need to develop the skills from doing work to getting the work done through others. And the values we develop move from valuing our individual work to valuing managerial work and developing your leadership skill set. So it's listening to podcasts like this to understand your context and where your gaps might be. So let's talk about moving from managing others to managing leaders. And here's a case study from the military. There's a military platoon commander, Captain Jones, who led a platoon of 30 soldiers, balancing logistics, training, and operations. When Jones was promoted to company commander, his focus shifted from managing lieutenants who now led the platoons under his command. The military has very strong leadership culture, able to execute under stress, obviously, as you should, and if you're going into high-intensity situations. So time. Jones had to divest himself of tactical tasks Focusing on strategic planning. So this is a theme. We've talked about this before. Be less of a tactician, more of a strategist. Focusing on strategic planning and ensuring his lieutenants were capable leaders. So focusing on culture, focusing on long-term. You're making the important non-urgent something that needs to happen. Why did I think of the story of the Grand Old Duke of York, who had 10,000 men. He marched them up to the top of the hill and he marched them down again. You remember that? If the Grand Old Duke of York had not seen the strategic imperative of keeping his troops fit and marching them up and down the hill every single day, when he was attacked, his troops would not have had the fitness for the battle and they would have lost the battle. And that focus, that long-term strategic thinking on keeping the fitness of his troops up was one of the reasons why the Grand Old Duke of York won his battle. And now we have this little nursery rhyme hundreds of years later to teach leadership and management lessons on the internet. Welcome. Welcome to the future. Skills. So Captain Jones had mastered evaluating his junior leaders' strengths, delegating effectively, and coaching them on leadership principles. His role shifted to ensuring they led well rather than directly managing soldiers. Pretty straightforward. And then values. Accountability became key. Jones learned to hold his lieutenants accountable for the platoon's performance rather than stepping in to solve problems himself. So when we're leading and managing other leaders, from a time perspective, managers must learn to only manage. It's difficult, but it is a decision to set boundaries and to divest yourself of individual tasks. You're still responsible for the results, which is a difficult challenge. And this is why it is a leadership challenge. It is a management challenge. It is a new skill. You're responsible for the results and you're not doing the tasks. That's leadership. That's management. So skills. Select the right people to lead and manage others. That's a skill set, to pick the right people. So you can use, I like using, frameworks to do that. Personality frameworks. I'm a big fan of predictive index, for example. Helps me define personalities and personality drivers. There's another one called the working genius, to figure out how people do things. Colby is another one that's out there. They call it cognitive, how people do their work. It's nice to put right people in the right seats of the boat. If you put right people in the right seats of the boat, it goes fast. Another skill, assign managerial and leadership work to the leaders you're managing. So instead of telling them about the results, you have to give them real work to do. So what is leadership work and what is managerial work? You can ask them to build culture. You can ask them how they're building culture. What are you doing this week to build culture? How have you built culture on your team? What are you doing to think longer term? How are you thinking ahead of time? How are you thinking beyond just a couple hours? How are you thinking ahead? How are you managing the limited resources you have delegated to you? And asking these questions and holding them to account, for leading and managing others. Finding ways to measure manager progress. We can use KPIs or metrics to see the efficiency that our managers have. We can use qualitative analysis, which is feedback from employees or just general sense of how they're progressing in their role. And the other skill is how to coach managers. How are you coaching them? Coaching is asking questions, holding space, allowing the others to come to the conclusions themselves, which is very different from telling. Coaching is different from teaching. It's very different from directing. Coaching is asking questions, holding space, allowing the other to come to the conclusion themselves, nudging, takes more patience, but the change is longer lasting. Values. So what values do we need to have? We need to understand and reward managerial work beyond your team's technical work. So beyond building a beautiful wall that's completely level, you need to reward the manager for building a good team culture. You need to reward the manager for using resources effectively. And then you also need to hold frontline managers accountable for their leadership and management. They feel the heat. I talk about leadership containment theory. Maybe I'll read a podcast on that sometime in the future. But one of the tools we have as leaders is, when do you raise the heat and when do you lower the heat? And we can raise the heat as a leader, and that intensity can help drive change and drive importance and drive meaning in people's work. But it is a balance. It is a balance, because we're not here to break people. We're here to build people up, make better organizations, work that contribute to society and leave a lasting impact. Let's talk about managing leaders to functional management. So if you're just managing leaders to now you're managing a function. And so this is in a larger organization. If you're a smaller business, functional management is less, but you could be move from leading a project team to being the head project manager, to being the general manager. In a much larger business, you'd be moving from leading a marketing team to leading the entire marketing department. So here's a client case study from one of the times I worked with one of these big FANG companies. So there's FANG is Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google, FANG. So there was a FANG product manager, Alex, a product manager at a tech giant, who transitioned to a functional leadership role, overseeing several product managers across diverse teams. So his role required stepping back from the nitty-gritty of individual products into the head of product. So Alex had to spend more time in cross-functional meetings and longer-term planning. And so he's talking more to the DevOps, to the quality assurance people, to the customer success folks, to finance, to HR, with the senior leadership. And he had to carve out more time to support his team leaders while aligning his function with the organization's goals. And this is a concept called strategic deployment. And this is a headache for a lot of functional leaders at this level, is that they will get a strategy pushed down to them from the private equity firm, the corporate overlords, the head office that's far away, and it's not quite aligned with the reality that they see in the ground or in the function that they're leading. But that's the art of deploying strategy. You take that strategy that is directed from the individuals whose responsibility it is to see further down the road and have more experience and access to information and context than you necessarily have in your role, and you have closer view to the front line, as a functional manager. So your role is to adapt that strategy to the realities you see. That is 100% the job. And as we deploy strategy, and that's part of the skills. That was part of the skills. He developed advanced communication skills. You're learning to play politics more effectively in an organization this size. People often complain that they have to play too many politics. Guess what? That's leadership. That's the leadership challenge. You have to be good at politics. And politics is about making trade-offs. Politics is about figuring out what values are most important, what you need to advocate for, where you need to fight the fight, and where you need to let go, where you need to disagree and commit, and where you need to disagree and push for change. And this is judgment, and judgment is developed over time. And you're not going to be perfect at it, and you're going to make some mistakes. That's totally okay. So skills. He developed advanced communication skills. Went down the politics rabbit hole here. The tributary. Let's not mix metaphors. Let's stay on the leadership river. And to resolve conflicts between engineering and marketing. Yep. Making promises and delivering those. Don't make promises that we can't deliver. I won't go down there. Ensured efficient resource allocation. Yes. Making sure the right people get the right amount of money and more staffing, and fostered teamwork across functions. Cross-functional communication. This becomes very important as an organization grows. People need to talk with another and share information. The better, more organically information can be shared, and the more willing people are to solve problems across functions, even though it's tangential to their job, the more successful a company can be. It's sometimes harder to, sometimes it's harder to measure the value. This is an intangible part of culture that you can't put on an OKR, which is an objective key result, or a KPI, which is a key performance indicator. Cross-functional collaboration, though, even though it's hard to measure, it's hard to put on a balance sheet. That intangible is part of a culture that will make an organization successful and enable it to accomplish its vision and achieve its impact. Values. Alex adopted a broader perspective, prioritizing how his function's success contributed to the company's long-term competitive advantage. With bigger perspective comes a greater willingness to make trade-offs. People, especially in large organizations, as you are at the bottom of this large organization, you often don't quite understand why people are making certain decisions. That's why and sometimes people are making the wrong decisions for the wrong reasons. There can be a lot of greed and selfishness in some large organizations. My recommendation is to move away from that. If you can, move towards organizations that are impact-driven, values-driven, purpose-driven, looking to make communities, people's lives a better place. These are the types of organizations I try to build. I look to support people to help more people. So when we're leading and managing business functions, let's go back again to time, skills, and values. So time, what are you working on? Well, from a time perspective, business team meetings and working with other functional managers. So there's a lot more meeting time because you need to understand what's happening across this larger organization, figuring out how you can coordinate tasks and functions across the different silos of the organization. Siloing is a big issue in larger organizations. More time designing strategy. So that's your free time. You're sitting, you're walking, you're doing things, you're thinking strategically, you're thinking longer term. If I do this, then this will happen. If I do that, then that will happen. That becomes part of the chatter in your mind more often, and you carve out time to think strategically, and you're looking for competitive advantage. What is that X factor? I love how Shannon Susko puts that it's a program called Metronomics. She talks about the X factor. I'm sure it's another business management frameworks too, but this idea of this is the one thing we do that really truly differentiates us. Porter talks about this too from a strategic perspective. I come from an athletic background. In athletics, I was in the sport rowing, which was just put your blade in and pull harder, and so it rewarded people who just went harder. But winning in business is slightly different. It's not just about going harder. It's not just about getting to the finish line first. In business, as Dr. Porter says, it's the winner isn't necessarily the hardest working or the fastest. It's the one who's the most unique, the one who's the most unique offering and position. And so the the leader at this level, the functional management level or the business management level, has to start thinking about competitive advantage and how they're building competitive advantage. What's that X factor? How are you more unique? How are you more creative? We call this the USP, the unique selling proposition. How are you differentiated in the marketplace? Marketing. Okay. Skills. What skills do you need to develop at a functional level? You need new communication skills. You need to be able to speak that business framework. This is where MBA type language starts to come in, where we're talking about functions and silos and synergy and some of these $5 words that might not mean much, but start to mean something when you're operating at this level. You're starting to manage unfamiliar areas. You might have a specialty in operations or machinery or assembly line management or shop floor management, but now it's the next level. You're jumping into marketing and engineering and finance even more. So consider other functional needs and concerns beyond the function that you're existing in. As this functional manager, it's not just about your function anymore. There's bigger concerns to think about. So now that I'm leading them, the shop floor management function, how does that impact marketing, and what are marketing's concerns when they're going out and telling the world about our product, and what are the sales concerns as they're bringing customers in and giving them a tour and making promises, and what's engineering's concern as they're designing the work that we're getting done on the shop floor. And we have to start being aware of these other functions and how they interact. And we have to build that skill of teamwork, play politics more effectively, make those trade-offs with other functional managers while competing for resources. So that tension will exist, and that's part of the game at this level. From a value standpoint, we're adopting a broader, longer-term perspective that's more holistic. We're understanding why other functions matter. So being more naturally curious, thinking at a bigger perspective, we're trying to look at this business organism as a whole. So now let's add in another tributary. We've gone from, let me summarize, just leading yourself and other individual contributors to strictly only leading other leaders to now leading a function. And now we're going to move from a functional management to business management. So this is, you're leading an entire business, not just a function. So an entrepreneurial CEO is the founder of a thriving startup. And we'll call this CEO Emily. And Emily transitioned from running marketing and operations to managing the entire business. The shift from being a functional leader to a business manager tested her ability to balance priorities. This is a big shift for her, a big growth point, and she crushed it. Time. Emily learned to allocate blocks of time to reflect on strategic decisions rather than reacting to daily crises. If everything is urgent, nothing is urgent, and it's figuring out how to delegate crisis management and hold people accountable for crisis management. This shift improved her ability to assess market trends and plan for the future. She's able to make better strategic moves for the organization. From a skill standpoint, she gained more financial acumen and evaluated profit margins and capital expenditures from both short-term and long-term perspectives. Right? She's actually running the business. Profit, general rule of thumb for small, medium businesses, you want to have 10% profit, plowing a bunch of that back into the business, making sure that you have healthy cash flow, the payroll headaches don't show up, and excess profits, you can figure out if you're drawing them or plowing them back in. From a larger organization, your business within a business, you will have direction from, I call them overlords. Maybe it's tongue in cheek, but also you know, with a bit of care too, but we sometimes we have corporate overlords in a larger organization who have there's more financial controls when you're a business within a business, and that you have to report to your managers, your directors, on the state of your business within the larger business, which is also a challenge, which was different from Emily, who is, she was kind of leading this business, which she was part owner of. But business management is also within the context of a much larger structural framework if you're in a very big business. So Emily gained financial acumen, evaluating profit margins and capital expenditures from both short-term and long-term perspectives. And Emily also mastered prioritizing high-impact business opportunities. So it's starting to figure out what's the ROI, what's the return on investment. If I invest this over time, what will be the payback? And can I make strategic bets within the business that will allow the business to continue to grow? What values did Emily have? Well, Emily moved from focusing on functional wins to valuing the success of the business as a whole, ensuring profitability and sustainability. And so sometimes you have to take resources away from your favorite child. For Emily, it was marketing, which she loved, but had to take money away because understanding that marketing wasn't playing as big of a role as she thought it was when she was in it. So there had to be a shift in resource allocation to make the business work as a whole. So when we're leading or managing a business or a business unit, more time is spent allocated to thinking. We need to spend more time thinking and strategizing. And then we need to stop doing something every second of the day. There needs to be space in our day to actually think. We need to reserve time to reflect and analyze what's happening. Skills developed at the business unit level. You're responsible for the bottom line: profit, loss, cash flow. Cash flow is king, as they say. I have worked with too many people who've gone through cash flow issues, and it is the least fun experience of any business owner or business unit owner when profitability is down, cash flow is crunched. So we must learn to evaluate business from both short-term and long-term profit perspectives. Profit now. Sometimes we carve up the opportunity of the future by exploiting now. I had a client who would put on these sales and clear out their product and inventory, and then they wouldn't have sales later on. And then what's happening? Well, you got all your customers, instead of having them trickle in, with higher margins, you got them all at once with lower margins. Sometimes that can work, sometimes it doesn't. Value the success of the business. So you're valuing the success of the business, not just the function. You're valuing the people, obviously, as well, but the success of the business becomes fundamental. Profitability becomes more important than feasibility. And by that, it means just because you can do something, it doesn't mean you should do something. The profitability imperative becomes that much more important as the leader of the business, because without profit, without cash flow, again, rule of thumb, if you're running a business, an SMB, small medium business at this level, 10% profit. And if you're not making profit, then you're going to have pain. We move from business management to group management. So you're in a larger organization, larger corporation, a large private equity fund, or a large international conglomerate where your business is working alongside other businesses to find efficiencies. So I worked with an automotive executive, we'll call him Raj, a senior manager in an auto company. He was promoted to oversee multiple plants, and his role required a different mindset as he now managed plant managers instead of running one single facility. So he went from managing this business, managing this facility, and all the complexity that you could imagine in an auto plant to managing multiple auto plants. So Raj had to spend less time in operational details and more on strategic planning, capital allocation, and assessing risks across multiple locations. So more time thinking, more time forecasting, spreadsheeting, building out financial models, risk analysis, figuring out where I've got limited amounts of capital to deploy, and I need to invest it. Do I put the machinery in this one location or the next location? Which one's actually going to have the greatest return? What has the opportunity? What does the customer pipeline look like? More time thinking about the big picture, finding the information, and then making the bet. You never have complete information. You never have perfect information. You have to make a decision, take the bet, best that you know, and go for it. That's the challenge. So let's move into skills. He learned how to create and implement a portfolio strategy. So think about an investor. You don't just buy one stock. You buy multiple stocks that mitigate risk so that one could go up and one could go down, and you're balancing. So you're balancing investments between high performing and unperforming plants based on risk, based on market cycles, and you're looking to see what are trends in the industry and what are the general business cycles that we go through, because in lots of these industries you'll have great years and you'll have poor years. Raj also coached his plant managers on aligning their work with the company's vision. So we're talking strategic deployment. I could do another podcast on strategic deployment, which I find is quite useful concept for people to understand as they're working within a big organization. Values. Raj derived satisfaction from developing his managers, general managers, I will say, and driving success across the company's plant portfolio. So and again, you're further away from the frontline work, and so you have to find ways to derive satisfaction from the esoteric nature of the work that you're doing. It's not quite like building a table or screwing a screw into a wall. But with the right training and perspective, you can start to see managers develop. You can see the business growing as a whole. You can start to see the evidence on this on the balance sheets. You can see the strategies that you picked, succeed or fail, and that can give you satisfaction, especially if you're making the right bets, the right decisions, empowering people, and recognizing the impact that you're having at this level. As at this level of business group management, you're supporting general managers who are supporting functional leaders, who are supporting frontline managers, who are supporting leaders who are also leading individual contributors, who are also supporting those individual contributors. So you're supporting a large network of human power. So as we're leading and managing a business group, time is spent we succeed indirectly from a time perspective at the business group level. We succeed indirectly by managing and developing several business units and business managers. So it's not your success anymore. It's the success of these business units and business managers that you're looking to empower, as well as hold accountable and drive. Always asking for more. That's part of your job. Yeah, you're always asking for more. Never enough. Never good enough. Skills. You're evaluating strategies to allocate and deploy capital. You got to get way better at understanding the right places to put your valuable capital. There's only so much of it out there. Capital comes, capital goes, but effective deployment of capital is really what makes our economic system work. That is capitalism. Can you get this capital and make it as productive as possible? That's a responsibility as a manager. Can we develop other business managers, as people, and running them through identifying where their leadership gaps are and where their leadership strengths are, finding support for them if you can't deliver that support. Creating and implementing portfolio strategies, so having a good technical ability of where capital should be deployed and how to mitigate risk. So we're talking about enterprise risk at this level, reducing enterprise risk, lower exposure to economic cycles, as well as anticipated risk, whether it's publicity risk from bad community relationships, or a risk from legal, or whether it's the risk from harming someone with your product. There's lots of different risks that can show up, and this becomes more of your job at this level. You're also driving core business capabilities. So again, when you're running a business group, you're holding your business managers accountable for business outcomes. You're giving them the profit imperative based on the larger strategic framework that you are getting from your enterprise leader and the board of directors. Values derive satisfaction from the success of other people's businesses. So now you get that sense of, wow, your business succeeded. I'm so pumped for you. It's a good feeling. I get that feeling as I work as a business coach. It's similar. I have to bring in some of these skills from a business coaching perspective. Appreciate how a portfolio of businesses can be different yet complementary. Seeing how the different businesses that you're managing within a business group, how they can be so remarkably different and complementary. Sometimes of a client who's just retained to break a bunch of business groups apart, look at them, and figure out where there's complementary interactions between these different businesses and which ones need to be parceled and sold. Businesses sold. So now let's talk about group management to enterprise management. So there's a global logistics CEO, Sophia. She's a former COO of a shipping conglomerate and transitioned to the CEO role. She's very high driving, very successful woman. She faced the challenge of thinking globally and balancing the needs of various subsidiaries. Had a very hard edge, very intelligent person. Sophia focused on setting the company's strategic direction and aligning quarterly performance with a long-term vision. Her calendar was filled with meetings involving shareholders, government officials, and global clients. Great communicator, understood what resources each of these partners could offer, was able to speak on a big picture level. From a skill point, she managed external relationships and had to master that. She had to get better at anticipating risks. She's naturally good at that already. Assembling a team of ambitious executives to lead an organization, was able to do that. Had more issues actually managing that team. Sophia learned to navigate power dynamics, knowing some of her direct reports aspired to her position. Yeah, lots of conflict there, and there a lot of very hard-edged conversations. On this team, we talked a lot about leading above the waterline or below the waterline. And it's not whether we're above the waterline or below the waterline, it's being aware of where we are. And when we say we're above the waterline, we're thinking of contribution values. We're acting in a way that our best self would feel honorable. When we're below the waterline, we're acting from our more reactive self. So we're either controlling, protecting, which is distancing, or pleasing. Most in this level have controlling or protecting functions below the waterline. So anger, hot, heated conversations, learning strategies to de-escalate, to notice it, to notice the chatter, when it shows up or when it comes out, when you turn up the heat too much and you notice it, finding a way to take a breath, take a pause, apologize as quickly as you notice it. So I noticed I'm getting really fired up and it's heated here. This is not the way. This is not a productive way to communicate. I apologize. I care deeply about this. Can I have a moment to compose? Most reasonable people will, especially if you're doing good work with a good organization, they give you leeway for that. You don't get there. You don't get to this level of that big of an organization if you don't have ambition, and you have to hold that ambition in context when you're trying to do some of these big things. So from a value standpoint, Sophia embraced trade-offs and shifted from an operational mindset to a visionary one. She had to project a vision. This is what I see versus we got to just get this stuff done. Appreciating the complexity of managing a global enterprise. Big transition and great work. So when you're managing a whole organization, a big one, operating internationally, lots of employees, lots of people depending upon you, lots of contractors, subcontractors, churning, a lot of economic value, as well as just human value. Right? People are working for every single one of these organizations. It comes back to people, and I always bring it back to people. When we're leading the whole organization, where did she spend her time, and where should you spend your time as an enterprise leader? Well, you're setting direction and developing operating mechanisms to drive quarter-by-quarter performance that's in tune with the longer-term strategy. So you're keeping the big picture in mind, and you're keeping the quarterly picture in mind and holding people to account. From a skill standpoint, you're proactively managing a long list of external systems, relationships, and risks. Especially from a large enterprise, there's a lot of communication. We often see some of these big CEOs, they're out there, they're on our social media feeds or news channels, what have you, but that's their job. Their job is to get out there, to spread the message of their company, to build relationships and to socialize with other people of power and influence and means. And there's a lot that goes on at that level, and one relationship can afford a lot of opportunity for the organization, the people that you lead, if you can manage that properly and communicate the value exchange properly. Your job and your skill is to assemble a team of high-achieving, ambitious, direct reports, knowing some of them want your job. So there will be, like we said, at lower levels in the organization or smaller organizations, there is conflict, there is tension that needs to be held. There's just even more at an organization of this size. And it's, and I've facilitated a number of these meetings. It can be intense. That's good. I like intensity. Love intensity. Step into the fire, and we need to manage it appropriately. Right? We don't, intensity for the sake of intensity is not good. But intensity also is an indicator that you care. This is something that matters to you. So we have to get back to shared values, shared purpose. This is where culture matters. This is where leadership matters. Let's talk about values. What do you value as an enterprise leader? You learn to value trade-offs, thinking years ahead, global perspectives, and appreciate what it's like to manage one entity. You've got that perspective. you're still responsible. You're still responsible to the board. The directors come at you. They lean on you. They know they've been there before, and the directors are responsible to the shareholders. This is the leadership river. So what happens when your business is smaller if you're not an Amazon or you're not a more global company? Well, in medium-sized business, it's common for owners to evolve from hands-on roles to overseeing the larger operations. So let's dig into a case study. Past client, it was a custom home builder. So Fred, who was a custom home builder, was expanding into subdivision development, and this transition required him to embody the whole organization, enterprise and business management, while delegating more to functional managers and building a structure to support higher level strategic thinking. That's a word salad right there. But again, this guy went from swinging a hammer to helping other people swing the hammer and swinging it beside them to training up the project managers who were standing beside the people swinging the hammer, and he didn't touch the hammer ever. And then eventually he was training these managers to train the people who were beside the frontline guys swinging the hammer, and he had to figure out how to establish functions and lead those functions and think strategically, because he's working as the business manager, the group manager, the enterprise manager. Those top three were all roles were all combined, and there's less because it's a smaller business, obviously. He had partners, but he was the majority shareholder, so it was him. And then eventually built a board of directors, and then moved down the road to build the company to sell it. But time management. So Fred had to shift from daily involvement in individual products to focusing on overarching business strategies. So less on like this home or that home or this subdivision or that subdivision, but to, where actually are we going? Where are we sourcing our materials? How are we getting our laborers, our workers? How are we making this work in a bigger picture? And this included allocating time for market analysis, seeing where the trends are politically. From a home building perspective, there's more immigrants, in our country where I'm at in Canada, then more homes need to be built. If there's less, then there's less demand. There's a very simple example, including allocating time for market analysis, financial planning, establishing partnerships with suppliers, with contractors, with unions, by entrusting project management to capable team members. He can delegate his efforts to scaling the business, work on the business, not in the business. So from a skill development, he had to transition to a developer, which demanded proficiency in land acquisition, negotiating land acquisition, then regulatory compliance, figuring out how to change what the regulatory impact environment was dictating, what the regulatory environment was dictating, what could be built on that land, and possibly even challenging that and trying to shift land use to a certain extent, and large-scale project financing, accessing money and proving returns so that you could get bankers on board, investment bankers on board to achieve that vision. So Fred needed to develop skills at risk assessment, stakeholder management, and navigating the complexities of subdivision development. So from a work value standpoint, Fred's values had to evolve from being a craftsman and just getting the project done to becoming a visionary leader who wants sustainable growth. And he emphasized innovation, community impact, long-term profitability to guide his decisions in the expanded role. So by embracing these changes, Fred successfully transitioned from a custom home builder to a subdivision developer, to someone who built a business with enterprise value, which is a business that can sell, that can operate on its own and give the four freedoms of entrepreneurship. Freedom of time, where you spend your money, freedom of money, which is having enough money to live, freedom of passion, doing the things you love, and freedom of relationships, not only working with the people you want to work with. So as we finish it up, here's the practical application for emerging leaders. So please use this leadership river as a metaphor and a guide. You can use this to better understand your growth trajectory and what it takes to get to that next level of leadership. When you have a model and a map, it's easier to get there, and this is why I've shared this with you. So here's a question. Are you leading individual contributors, or are you leading managers? Think about it. Come back to this blog post, look at it, put it into your AI chatbot, talk to it. Adjust your values, adjust your skills, adjust your time to emphasize developing others when you move from leading individual contributors to leading managers. There are different skills required. You spend your time doing different things. You have to value different outcomes. And are you moving from managing one team to managing a portfolio of teams? Well, let's start appreciating the success of others over your personal wins. You have to appreciate those wins, right? The extrovert wants public appreciation. The introvert wants private appreciation. Doesn't change at different levels of the business. The leadership river invites leaders to embrace growth with intention, flowing from one phase to the next with clarity and with confidence. So I'd love to give credit where credit is due. So thank you, Walt Mailer, Ram Charant, Stephen Drotter, James Knoll, who wrote the Leadership Pipeline, while incorporating some modern insights. The imagery and evolution illustrated here was just drawn from my practical frameworks and experience working with leaders across industries over the last 20 years, and my passion for developing leaders to help people take advantage of the opportunities or endure the burdens of leadership. So here's a final thought. Leadership is about navigating the river, learning how to master the flow, and building the capacity to lead a bigger boat. There's a metaphor for you, folks. Thank you for your time, and thank you for listening to this first podcast. My mission is to positively impact organizational cultures and leaders who are driven to make things happen. I'm here to support. I work as an executive business coach. I'm based in Victoria, BC, but work all over North America, from British Columbia to California to Georgia, Ontario, Quebec. I've also authored a business book, The Responsibility Ethic. It's an older one. I've got another one in the works, Built for Hard. It'll come out eventually, but good things take time, and I'm willing to take the time to do it properly. Please stay in touch. Check out our website and our blog, valuesdrivenachievement.com, and I will link this blog at the bottom of the podcast. Thank you. And I'm trying to figure out a sign off. I'm trying to be a Walter Cronkite. I haven't done this enough. I don't have a signature sign off. Lead well, lead yourself, lead others. Be a good person. The world needs more good people. Less jerks. Take care and let me know. Post in the comments if you like this. Post in the comments what's the next article on my blog you'd love me to narrate and go into, explain a little more. Thank you, and we will talk to you later.